What you are about to hear may scare you. If you are not ready for information that will not only change your worldview, but perhaps your life completely, then you should turn off this video now. An event with profound implications takes place in September 2015. A 3,000-year-old mystery called the Shemitah. Some are aware of it, most aren't. Financial elites on Wall Street call it the end of a 7-year cycle. What they either don't know or won't say, however, is that these endings are historically disastrous, and this one may be even worse. There are signs, both economic, financial, and military, that this September 2015 could change everything about the way we live and work and even survive. Unfortunately, while Shemitah may formally end in September, its ramifications could expand with considerable destructiveness. While many are not aware of the specifics, people are uneasy. A Washington Examiner article reported that 72% in a recent poll feared an economic crash, and that those expressing concern were at the highest level ever. Please watch this video to understand what you need to know and how to take action to protect yourself and your loved ones. It may be the most important 30 minutes you've spent this year, or any year.
When we last spoke last January, you weren't very optimistic about the global economy. What would you say about the state of the economy now?
This system is in collapse, and it's unbelievable, and most people don't even see what's going on.
Here's the prophetic things with this, Sid. This is just one of the things. That if the rise of a tower speaks of the rise of a nation, what does the fall of a tower speak of? It's a warning of the future of America.
So I want you to tell me what you think is going to happen.
I believe, whether it happens in this period or not, and I'd be ready, I believe, without any question, a great shaking is coming to America. And this shaking will affect the economy, will affect the financial realm, and can be very well more than either of those realms, but it will affect that. Something like a famine in the land. I believe even services and infrastructure will stop.
So what are the top things that are grabbing your attention right now?
Mostly, it's how the U.S. government and the Federal Reserve are reacting to all the problems. We're in the last days of this financial system in the U.S. This is Zimbabwe. This ship is going down. This is the USSR in 1989.
Well, lots of people wouldn't believe you. They'd say, you know what, you're out in left field. You're nuts.
Let's start with cyber.
Yeah.
You've said that a cyber 9/11 is not an if, but a when. What would a cyber 9/11 look like, and how soon could it happen?
It could happen imminently. What would it look like? It could take many forms, but let me just give one that may come to mind, which is what happens when the electric grid goes down. We saw that during Sandy, and you see how that impacts everything from the ability to heat homes, to the ability to pump gasoline, to the ability to have lighting at night, everything. So when we look at the nation's critical infrastructure and where it is vulnerable, one of the vulnerabilities is through the cyber and the networked cyber world that we live in. We have been, kind of trying to get this word out. The Secretary of Defense has, I have, the Attorney General has, the Chair of the Joint Chiefs has, saying, look, we shouldn't wait till there is a 9/11 in the cyber world. There are things we can and should be doing right now.
Now, however, he is making his latest, most dire prediction. He is calling for a major disruptive event in not only the markets, but possibly in politics, the money system, and your way of life. All to come possibly as soon as September 15th, 2015.
It is a pleasure to have back on with us world-famous adventurer, entrepreneur, investor, and writer, Jeff Berwick. This may be our most important show yet, so let's get right into this, as you're not going to want to miss what Jeff Berwick has to say today. And, Jeff, you've never been shy about telling people your opinions, but your latest pronouncement may be your boldest yet.
Yeah, it is, but I really think now is the time to be bold. I found that most people don't know about this information, and I think it needs to be shown the light of day. I guess I should start by saying that I've never made such an exact short-term prediction, but when people see the evidence I've uncovered, they'll understand why I believe a massive event could happen as early as this September.
Give us some background on how you came to this conclusion.
Well, it started out quite simply. In 2010, I stated that the US dollar would collapse within the next decade. To me, the path was quite clear. You just look at the total debt of the US government, now at $18 trillion, and its growth, and you can see where this is headed. And when you look further, you can see that even with a monstrous $18 trillion debt, it was only a small part of the story, as so much of the debt and liabilities of the US aren't properly accounted for. Today, the amount of debt and liabilities of the US government is over $95 trillion. That's $300,000 per person in the US, or $1.2 million in federal government debt and liabilities for every family of four. I'm sure you remember the Great Recession or the financial crisis of 2008. It was very bad.
Absolutely no. Nobody is accounting for what they're spending. You got people and families out here in the United States that are struggling. I just paid $600 worth of utility bills in 1 week.
Yes.
All right? I haven't got enough money to feed my family, but I make too much to get food stamps. I don't even make $10 an hour.
Right.
Now, if you took that money and subdivided it between the taxpayers in this country, we would stimulate the economy. You know why? Because we'd go out and pay off bills, pay off tax debts, create jobs, and buy stuff that we need.
Caller.
That's how you stimulate the economy.
And even George Soros was quoted on it as saying, "We witnessed the collapse of the financial system in 2008. And all they've done, and all they're still doing, is print money to act like it didn't die. But the proof is in the numbers." In 2008, the Federal Reserve announced something they had never done before.
The Treasury opened up its window to help. They pumped $105 billion in the system and quickly realized that they could not stem the tide. We were having an electronic run on the banks.
That money's been sloshing around and has mostly ended up in places like the stock market, which, even as we speak, continues to hit all-time highs. At some point, though, this money printing game has to stop, and the rest of the world knows this is a certainty. And in response, countries around the world have begun to move away from the dollar. China's begun their own bank transfer system, which is the first international payment system to compete with the US dollar-based SWIFT system. There's a worldwide move away from the dollar.
2 o'clock that afternoon, $5.5 trillion would have been drawn out of the money market system of the United States, would have collapsed the entire economy of the United States, and within 24 hours, the world economy would have collapsed. Now, we talked at that time about what would happen if that happened. It would have been the end of our economic system and our political system as we know it. And that Secretary and the Chairman of the Federal Reserve came those days and talked with members of Congress about what was going on. It was about September 15th.
There's a worldwide move away from the dollar. They're trying to rush it out to be completed by, of all dates, September 2015. Russia as well has been purchasing gold at record levels, and trade agreements around the world are for the first time in decades being done outside of the US dollar. For this and many other reasons, I've been expecting a collapse in the dollar. It's baked in the cake. And I've been telling my subscribers to prepare for this since 2010. Back in 2010, I said that we probably had 5 and no more than 10 years left before the collapse. We're now 5 years in, and I'm seeing the first signs of a major collapse coming this fall. And part of my reason for this has come with my discovery of the Shemitah.
Right, this is the part I want to get into. I've heard you speak and write on it recently. It sounds fascinating. Take as long as you want here and just tell us more about the Shemitah.
Sure. Regarding Shemitah, I want to state for the record that my discovery of it has emerged as part of my financial analysis. The Shemitah has religious connotation, but that's not my focus. The point is that there are evidence-based ramifications to Shemitah, and from a practical standpoint, that's what I wish to investigate and address. I'm just looking at the facts of what appears to be happening around September of this year, and that just happens to be the end of the Shemitah year. Whether this is a coincidence or not remains to be seen. And I should also say that I don't necessarily think this September will be the end crisis of all crises. It could be just the beginning of a process that unfolds that takes many years to end in total collapse. But that said, I first heard of the Shemitah after reading Jonathan Cahn's book, The Harbinger. That book mostly talked about eerie events related to 9/11 and the Shemitah. While I found all the events related to 9/11 to be incredibly interesting, the thing that really got my interest was in what he said about the Shemitah. Now, as background, the Shemitah is the Sabbath year, and it's the 7th year of the 7-year agricultural cycle mandated by the Torah for the land of Israel, and it's still observed in contemporary Judaism. To put it simply, every 7 years is a Shemitah year. Because it is based on the Hebrew calendar, it doesn't fall on the same dates every year as our Western calendar, but it does follow quite closely. The Shemitah is also known as a time where all debts are settled, every 7 years. It also can be interpreted as the washing away of things. But what caught my attention was that the last day of the Shemitah for the last 2 Shemitahs in 2001 and 2008 fell on days with a major market collapse. The last day of Shemitah in 2001 fell on September 17th, and that was the first day the U.S. stock markets opened after 9/11. That day had the greatest one-day stock market point crash in U.S. history up to that time. The Dow fell almost 700 points, or 7%, and it was a record that held for precisely 7 years until the end of the next Shemitah year. That year was 2008. On September 29th, 2008, the exact final day of the Shemitah, the Dow plummeted 777 points, which still today remains the greatest one-day stock market crash of all time. You may be noticing quite a few sevens in all of this. As well, on that day, it was the only known day on the New York Stock Exchange where the opening bell wouldn't ring.
You're watching CNBC's Squawk on the Street, where the opening bell should have rung 5 seconds ago, but has not. I don't know whether we actually need the bell to start trading.
Hold on. There is a little bit of a consternation down here about there being no bell. All right. Our market reporters are standing by. Bob Pisani, have you ever seen anything like no bell?
Yeah, that's a little strange here.
I then decided to go back to Shemitah years since 1900, and I was very surprised at what I found. 1917 was a Shemitah year. 1917 marked the year that the U.S. entered into World War I, and soon after, the Russian, German, Austrian, and Turkish empires had collapsed. Remember, the Shemitah is a time of washing away. 1930-1931 was a Shemitah year, and certainly wasn't a good time to be in the markets. From the beginning of the Shemitah year until the end of the Shemitah, the market dropped 50% from 200 to 100, and then after the final day of the Shemitah, the market dropped another 50% to below 50. Now, the next major Shemitah was in 1937 to 1938, and if you were in the market that year, you'd have lost nearly 50%. But more importantly than the stock market during that Shemitah year was what was going on in the world. During the Shemitah year in 1938, Germany began foreign aggression and seized Austria and Czechoslovakia. The World War that began in 1938 finally ended in September of 1945, nearly on the exact same day as the final day of the Shemitah. Countless empires and countries were left devastated by that date, again a washing away, if you will. The next Shemitah was in 1973. In 1973, the Bretton Woods worldwide monetary system collapsed. The following Shemitah was in 1980, seen by most gold bugs and market historians as marking the end of the massively inflationary 1970s. Then the next Shemitah year ended in 1987. During that time, Black Monday occurred, the biggest one-day percentage drop in history on the Dow. That same week, the London stock market closed due to an extremely rare hurricane having hit London. Again, a sort of washing away. During the next Shemitah, the 1994 bond market massacre caused financial strife worldwide. And I've already mentioned the incredibly bizarre things that happened during the next 2 Shemitahs in 2001 and 2008. Of course, you can say that if you look for patterns, you can always find them in one way or another, and to an extent that's true. But this Shemitah 7-year cycle is so eerily correct that it is well known on Wall Street as the 7-year cycle. For this reason, I've been keeping an eye on the end of the next Shemitah year on September 13th, 2015. And because of this, I began doing some research on what events may be happening in or around that time. And the amount of bizarre things scheduled for this coming September is what convinced me something is being planned for this fall.
Yes. Everything you've covered so far is the past. Let's talk about the present and near future.
Well, I decided to begin looking up the days on or around September 13th of this year to see if I could find any interesting events, and it didn't take long before I found numerous events, all happening on or around that date of major significance. The first thing I found was that the United Nations opens its 70th session of the UN General Assembly on September 15th in New York City. World leaders from around the world will be attending. They call it their Jubilee session. Now, I didn't mention this yet, but every 7th Shemitah, or in other words, every 7th 7-year period, or after every 49 years, is called the Jubilee year, every 50 years. In the Jubilee, according to Jewish religion, it is the year when God, supposedly, gives back land taken away from their ancestors to them.
Terry and the chairman of the Federal Reserve came those days and talked with members of Congress about what was going on. It was about September 15th. Here's the facts.
The next Jubilee year starts on September 14th of this year. As well, in September, the UN plans to launch a new plan for managing the entire globe called the Sustainable Development Summit from September 25th to 27th. Some of the biggest names on the planet, including Pope Francis, will be speaking at this summit. The focus of this plan is to expand the scope of global governance. Global governance can also be defined as one world government or a new world order. The Pope, interestingly enough, will be busy in the US all of September, as on September 15th, the Pope will also be speaking at the UN, and then on September 24th, he'll also be speaking at the US Congress. The next thing I notice is that Jade Helm, a massive, unprecedented rollout of the US military inside of the US, runs from July 15th until September 15th. This is particularly interesting in that there always seems to be a drill being run by the government during when an actual crisis occurs. Jade Helm has already begun in preparations, and the amount of military equipment being amassed in the US is truly mind-boggling. There's a lot of speculation that this amount of military buildup in the American South is in preparation for some sort of civil unrest. That speculation built when a number of Walmart stores recently closed on the same day across the southern US with no notice due to plumbing problems and are said to remain closed for 6 months. This fueled speculation that it's to be used for some sort of detention center for unrest. They said they wouldn't reopen for 6 months, which just happens to be after September. But it gets stranger and stranger. Recently, the New York-based Federal Reserve announced it's moving its operations outside of New York to Chicago because of concerns about a natural disaster. One might ask, what natural disaster are they expecting in New York that they aren't expecting in Chicago?
Have the elite given us fair warning that there is a meteor coming? Have they? I'm going to say yes, we have been warned. It's called Deep Impact. It came out May 8, 1998. That date's important. Unless a comet can be destroyed before colliding with the Earth, only those allowed to be in shelters will survive. Will people survive? And by the way, the lead actor was Morgan Freeman, a black president.
Michelle Bachmann actually predicted that I would bring about the biblical end of days. Now that's a legacy. That's big. I mean, Lincoln, Washington, they didn't do that.
Is that dating it? And they can't tell the population for fear the population will go into panic. The world elite then begin to prepare survival underground bunkers.
Kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks,
Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?
and NORAD announced that it is moving back into the Cheyenne Mountains because it is EMP hardened, leaving one to ask why NORAD is moving into the mountains to protect against a major attack at this time.
It certainly appears as though a lot is happening, all surrounding this September.
Absolutely, and the list of strangeness goes on and on.
And it's fucking loud. You hear that? You hear that shit? I have no idea, like, it's coming straight out of the sky. What is that?
Shit, what the hell is that? What the fuck? Okay, I don't know if you can see this. Check this out. Holy shit. What the fuck is that? Oh my goodness. What the hell? Fucking flipping out, dude.
There was the strange 7-minute speech by Christine Lagarde of the IMF talking about numerology and the number 7 that she made in January of last year. She started the speech by saying, "As you can tell, I do what I'm told." And she went on to say, "I want to test your numerology skills on the magic number 7. Most of you know that is quite a number."
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. As you can tell, I do as I'm told. Numerology skills, by asking you to think about the magic 7. Okay? Most of you will know that 7 is quite a number in all sorts of themes, religions.
That's a strange speech about numerology and the number 7 coming from the managing director of the IMF. There was also French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius, who made a bizarre speech in 2014, stating that we are on the edge of a climactic abyss.
We are, all of you know it, on the edge of a climatic abyss.
The fifth angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss. When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss.
We are, all of you know it, on the edge of a climatic abyss. In fact, we have 500 days to avoid a climate chaos.
Out of curiosity, I added up the days from that speech, and 500 days from it lands on September 23rd, 2015. Yet no one questioned him why 500 days exactly. You can find many more examples like this. Something's going on. What that is anyone's guess.
You want to take a guess?
There's too many variables to make a solid guess, but this is far too many coincidences that all seem to point to something massive happening around September of this year. Also, there's Martin Armstrong, who was jailed for having a computer model that amazingly predicts the fall of currencies, markets, and even nations, predicted 20 years ago that there will be a massive system reset, collapse, or crisis on October 1st, 2015. If you listen to the actions of the Fed, they seem to be worried about some sort of natural disaster to happen in the New York area.
There are massive asteroids orbiting near Earth. Asteroids that would dwarf a modern city. Asteroids that, no matter where they hit, would cause global destruction.
If you hit a large metropolitan area with an iron asteroid a mile across, That would be an unimaginable catastrophe for the local area as well as for the world. It would simply obliterate.
It would explode with 30,000 megatons of force. More power than the entire nuclear arsenals of all the armies of the world. People at Ground Zero would never know what hit them. Millions would die in the first instant. The air, superheated to 9,000 degrees, would ripple outward hundreds of miles, and millions more would perish. An entire metropolitan city would be wiped from the face of the earth. The impact would trigger an Armageddon of worldwide disasters. The initial impact would literally cause the whole planet to shake. Every major fault line could fail.
And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains.
John Boehner has just announced this. Pope Francis will visit Capitol Hill during his trip to the U.S. and will become the first pope to address a joint meeting of Congress on September 24th. As we've reported, in addition to Washington, the Pope will also be making stops. His first stop will be in Philadelphia. He'll also go to New York City. This is an enormous, highly anticipated event, obviously. And in sharp contrast to that other visit, the joint meeting that Boehner invited, of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu without first telling the White House or anyone else with the State Department. But this will be a very big deal indeed. September 24th on Capitol Hill.
The kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks,
Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand?
Literally caused the whole planet to shake. Every major fault line could fail.
And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood.
First is an earthquake that, depending on the size and speed of the impact, could be pretty severe, and it would be felt all over the world.
Billions of tons of earth, heated white hot, would be hurled into the atmosphere and then fall back to Earth, igniting fires over the entire planet.
These secondary impacts there'd be billions of them. They would be all over the world, and they would serve to raise the temperature of the whole atmosphere. If you're outside, you'd be facing temperatures as high as an oven set to broiling.
The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down on the earth. A third of the earth was burned up, a third of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up.
There'd be ground fires, forest fires all over the planet. Anything that could burn would burn.
The intense seismic activity causes volcanoes worldwide to erupt, blasting ash and smoke into a sky already blackened by raging fires. A black cloud forms around the entire planet.
This is not a cloud that causes a day to be dull and gray. This would be a cloud that would cut off all sunlight. The day would be black, the night would be black, and it would probably last for a year.
For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of recompense for the cause of Zion.
Will not the day of the Lord be darkness, not light? Pitch dark, without a ray of brightness?
When he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss.
As sunlight is cut off, the temperature drops and a nuclear winter scenario begins.
It would be raining. The rain rain would be so much laced with nitrous acid, it would be like the mother of all acid rains. Photosynthesis would shut down. Plants wouldn't be able to survive. People and animals that eat plants would not be able to survive. And creatures that eat plant-eating creatures wouldn't be able to survive. Death would just go right up the food chain. Finally, as the sky finally starts to clear, you get a greenhouse effect, which slowly builds up the temperature and could last for hundreds of years.
NATO, they appear to be preparing for an EMP attack. If you pay attention to the US military, they are apparently preparing for a massive amount of unrest inside the US. And if you pay attention to the UN, September seems to be a very busy month with leaders from around the world, including the Pope, attending numerous major events. In fact, we've already seen the first rumblings of a coming collapse happening in both Greece and China. The Shanghai stock market has already begun to collapse, falling more than 30% in the last 2 months, and the Chinese Nasdaq fell 40% in the last 3 weeks. And in Greece, the banks and stock market have been closed for weeks, and they're laying the foundation for a civil chaos that I expect to fully foment over the summer and explode in September. This will set off a chain reaction that will shake the entire US dollar-based financial system. This is enough evidence for me not to be anywhere near the US from now until at least October, and specifically in the month of September.
Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And welcome to the fourth quarter of my presidency. I am determined to make the most of every moment I have left. From Scripture, we learn of the miracle of restoration. You who have made me see many troubles and calamities will revive me again. From the depths of the earth, you will bring me up again. You will increase my greatness and comfort me again. John Boehner's already invited Netanyahu to speak at my funeral. Somebody's got to do it. Fact is, though, at this point, my legacy is finally beginning to take shape.
Saudi Arabia is apparently prepared to allow Israeli jets into its airspace to conduct attacks on Iran. That's according to a report by the Israeli Channel 2 TV station, citing an unnamed senior European source. The move will allow Israel to bomb targets in Iran and avoid a lengthy detour around the Persian Gulf. The report highlighted the close collaboration and shared intelligence between Israel and Saudi Arabia over Iran's controversial nuclear program. Both countries are worried Tehran is close to developing an atomic bomb.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered to lift the ban on the delivery of the S-300 missile systems to Iran. Putin's order will become effective upon his signature. Reports say the delivery of the S-300 systems could be completed in a few months to a year, depending on the model. Israel and the United States were quick to criticize Russia over the decision. Tel Aviv says it will put Israel in danger. Iran had purchased a sophisticated defense mechanism at $800 million in 2007, but Russia failed to deliver it until 2010, when the UN Security Council banned selling arms to Iran. Now the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, says that the S-300 is a defense system and does not fall within the sanctions on sales of arms to Iran.
Now, Russia is set to resume deliveries of its state-of-the-art air defense system to Iran. Vladimir Putin has signed a decree that ends a 5-year-old embargo. Now, let's get more details from RT's Medina Kochnova. So, Medina, what has prompted this move? Tell us more.
Well, the necessity for the embargo on S-300 air defense systems has fallen away as a result of relations with Iran improving and of a recent breakthrough that was reached in Switzerland over Tehran's nuclear program. Now, that's according to Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Now, the contract for supplying the S-300 was first signed 8 years ago, but then in 2010, the embargo was introduced in a bid to stimulate the talks between the 6 world powers and Iran over its nuclear program. And currently, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has given a go-ahead for delivery as the sides are getting closer to reaching a final agreement and lifting sanctions. Now, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Iran needs the S-300 due to quite a tense situation in the region, and he also stressed that the equipment in question is purely defensive and it represents no threat to nearby countries, including Israel. Now, and at the moment, all eyes are on Israel and its reaction on the news, considering the fact that the country always saw Iran as its main enemy.
Iran has reacted positively to Russia's decision to deliver S-300 defense missile systems. Defense Minister Brigadier General Hossein Dehghan says the decision is the manifestation of the determination by Iran and Russia to promote mutual ties in all areas. General Dehghan says cooperation between the two countries will help strengthen regional stability. Also, Iran's security chief, Ali Shamkhani, says Russia's decision to deliver S-300 missile system is the result of Iran's policies that he says have contributed to regional stability. Shamkhani says the decision was also the result of the goodwill of the Russian President Vladimir Putin towards Iran.
Inside the Iranian convoy lurking off the coast of Yemen are, a U.S. military official says, small Iranian warships, raising the stakes in an already tense standoff as 9 U.S. warships keep watch nearby, by sea and from the air, with U.S. F/A-18 Hornets flying reconnaissance missions. The convoy, though still in international waters, is now moving deeper into the Gulf of Aden. The American warships join vessels from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and other partner nations, prepared to intercept the Iranian vessels should they enter Yemeni territorial waters, an attempt to deliver arms to Houthi rebels. Still, U.S. officials tell CNN the American ships are primarily in place to give the president military options inside Yemen, and, crucially, to protect trade.
The movement of this particular aircraft carrier would augment the American military presence in the Gulf of Aden and would send a clear signal about our continued insistence about the free flow of commerce and the freedom of movement in the region.
Iran has often flexed its maritime muscle with high-profile, sometimes provocative exercises at sea. A confrontation with Iran, such as forcibly boarding an Iranian ship, would be extraordinary. Pentagon officials acknowledge that moving additional U.S. warships to the region provides additional options to assist the Saudi-led coalition if necessary.
We want to have the naval presence there not only to send a message, but also to be able to keep an eye on what these vessels do, and if the vessels are allowed to dock, what is unloaded and where those supplies go.
It is the rapid deterioration on the ground in Yemen that the U.S. is most concerned with. Recent airstrikes in the Houthi-controlled Yemeni capital of Sana'a have killed 25 and wounded more than 400. All this as the U.S. tries to finalize a nuclear deal with the Iranians and urge the release of U.S. citizens held in Iran. Among them, Washington Post journalist Jason Rezaian, who is now facing 4 charges, including spying and aiding a hostile government.
Being president is never easy. I still have to fix a broken immigration system, issue veto threats, negotiate with Iran, all while finding time to pray 5 times a day.
The White House said to be ready to ramp up weapons sales to Saudi Arabia in an effort to ease fears of a deal with Iran. There are reports the Obama administration is weighing to offer the Saudi kingdom the same advanced weapons previously only sold to Israel. Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, the author of the new book, Valley of the Shadow, and a Fox News strategic analyst. Colonel, good morning to you. This is bunker buster technology. This is advanced missile defense system. What does that mean, if true, for the Saudis?
Well, it tells me that the Saudis, the Israelis, and the Pentagon, the serious players in the Pentagon, believe the Iranians are going to get nukes and there will eventually be a major war. I mean, our erstwhile allies, the Sunni Arabs, Gulf Arabs, Saudis, are in an absolute panic. They believe the Obama deal is a bad deal. The Israelis believe it's a bad deal. And Obama, while his ostensible goal is peace, by triggering this further arms race, and also by virtually guaranteeing that Iran will get nuclear weapons, he is building up the Middle East, setting up the Middle East for a region-wide conflagration that will scorch beyond anything we've seen to date. I mean, this is going to be Shia versus Sunni, Israel in the mix. And the bunker busters for the Saudis are a little bit of a sop, because I'm not convinced their pilots could deliver them accurately, especially with the new Russian-built air defense systems going to Iran. But the Israelis getting the big new SBU-57, the 30,000-pounder, that is serious, because the Israelis could do a lot of damage.
But in the big picture, though, you think what this says, though, is that we, as a nation, the administration, is willing to do whatever it takes to get a deal with Iran.
Yeah, you bribe the Gulf Arabs and Saudis with the weapons they want, so they're quiet while the deal goes through with Iran. And that deal with Iran, I mean, people are agonizing over what the Iranians are doing now throughout the region. Once that deal is signed, even if the U.S. Congress blocks our part of it, once the deal is signed with the Iranians, suddenly the sanctions around the world are lifted. People pile in to make money. It's a gold rush. Iran is rich, and a rich Iran can do more damage than a poor Iran.
There is no question about that. There is an arms race right now, and you can see it play out day by day. I wonder how concerned the Israelis are. I wonder what Mitch McConnell's going to do this week in the Senate, along with Bob Corker from Tennessee. Can Congress get in the middle of this or not?
Congress can retard the deal as it affects the United States and Iran. It cannot stop the global gold rush. It just can't do it. But, you know, Obama and the Iranians together have done something we would have thought was a miracle once, and that was bring the Saudis, the Gulf Arabs, the Egyptians, the Israelis all together in a relatively overt alliance against Iran.
Wow, that's a remarkable statement. Your new book is called Valley of the Shadow. You have a lot of talent. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you.
Valley of the Shadow is out now. Nice to have you.
We need to realize how close this clock is to getting toward the midnight hour. And I think that's why, for our sake, for the sake of our family, for our nation, for the next generations, we need to cry out to a holy God. This is coming faster than anyone can see. I know I worked very hard on the Intelligence Committee to try and keep up with what was happening in the world. It got to such a crescendo, I could hardly keep up with it anymore. The events have picked up such a pace, and they're going to continue. It's just like the Bible forewarned, that in the last days it will be like the beginning of birth pangs. In my opinion, we are far beyond the beginning of birth pangs. We're moving far down into the process. For women who are listening to this show today, you know what I'm talking about, what it's like to deliver a baby at the very beginning stage and then at the very end before the baby is born. All I can tell you as a mom who has given birth to 5 babies, the birth pangs are very close together. They're very intense now, and we are literally watching month by month the speed move up to a level we've never seen before with these events. Barack Obama is intent. It is his #1 goal to ensure that Iran has a nuclear weapon. Why? Why would you put the nuclear weapon in the hands of madmen who are Islamic radicals who believe it's their religious duty to bomb Israel and to bomb the United States? That is where we're headed right now. And that's why the best thing that we can do is have churches and pastors explain our times. Believers need to get our lives right with God. And then we intercede. We intercede and intercede. And then not despair, but rejoice that we get to be living in the most exciting time in history. Prophets said we look to the future. We long to see those days and live in those days. Why? Because it's the return of a soon and coming King. Jesus Christ is coming back. We, in our lifetimes, potentially could see Jesus Christ returning to earth, the rapture of the church. this is one of the most exciting times in history. We need to be exactly watching the tenor of the times, be observing, and look up our redemption draweth nigh. These are wonderful times, but we see the destruction, but this is the destruction that was foretold.